Well, how is your walk with God today? Did it get windy since Wednesday? I thought it would be appropriate to remind ourselves that we need help. How many has learned that you need help over the last week and a half? Yeah, I need some help. I need some help to do what?
Learn Torah.
You know, if you don't know something, you'll never get the right answer.
Amen.
I believe that one of the main purposes that this house has is so that when we stand before God, we can't say, "No one ever told me." Now, the next challenge is now on us. Once we've been told the truth, what do we do about it? Because it's one thing to know the right answer. It's another thing to do the right answer. There's a lot of people who have gone to church and they do the right thing according to what they've been told. But do they do it because they have to, or do they do it because they want to? Living is doing it because you really want to. You know, when no one's looking. We know the right answer. I walked into the living room, and my daughter was standing on the back of the couch, leaning up against the corner of the wall, and immediately she fell and sat right down. We know what is right. We learned what is right. But do we live it when no one's looking? Because we immediately change as soon as authority walks into the room. I don't need to go through the process of teaching her what is right. She has now proven to me she knows what's right. Now I have to teach her how to live it when I'm not looking. Oh boy, what else do we need help with? Yeah. Why do we not need much courage to do what's wrong? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Well, everybody is doing what's easy. It takes courage to stand up and do what is right. Oh my. If you're following the helper, the shamash, where is it taking us now? You know, there's some hope when you pass one day and say, you know, I made it through this day and I actually did what God taught me. I actually lived it. I stood up and said the truth. There's hope for me.
Yeah. Yep.
I can do this again. Now that we've got our life in order, what can we do?
Go to the other side.
Now we can help someone else. I want to be able to know God in such a way that my lifestyle gives me hope and courage to help someone else. What's that going to require? Yeah. Begrudgingly helping people. That's what that's going to take. Do you know there's a lot of people who want to help others? But the challenge in this life is, am I going to help them keep the commandments of God, or am I going to help them desecrate their temple?
Yeah. What's the voice?
What will I give them? There's a lot of people giving right now. What am I giving?
That's it.
Am I giving someone truth, or am I giving them iniquity?
Yeah. What's the spirit? That's moving.
What happens after that? You know, if we're willing to help someone else, we will begin to look at our own life.
Yeah, dedicated for the purpose.
If I want to hear God, all of a sudden now my relationship with Him gets really important. The lack of holiness will separate us from hearing His direction. But when we stand there with courage and ready to give to someone's life and we have holiness in our life, now that's something worth fighting for, because now I can help them not in the flesh.
Yeah.
Now I have the ability to step closer to God and hear Him and sense what He is saying in that very moment.
You know the voice of the
If you've said, man, I've prayed to God and I've never heard His voice, might be this one's not lit.
yeah. Those other voices got annoying.
So then after you actually hear His voice, not what your flesh wants,
Right.
what happens?
Oneness with Him.
You know, we might be an actual
And oneness.
helpmate to God. Just because the season of remembering this, on the calendar has passed, it doesn't mean that this stops. The wind is going to blow very strongly for the next few days, and it's going to get very cold around these parts. There will be opportunity for us to say, I don't have enough strength to be holy. There'll be opportunity for us to say, I'm not giving to that person. I'm afraid. There'll be opportunities for us to say that. After you learn something, there comes the test. Do you desire to keep this lit this year? In as much as the Maccabees fought for 3 years just to get the opportunity to light it, how hard will you fight to keep it lit? Desecration is on every commercial, on every advertisement, and it's available.
Sure is.
It is readily available to have another God before Him.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder why that was so important to Him. Because He's looking for someone who will choose Him when they very obviously could choose something or someone else.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This morning, my message title is this: Is the force with you? Now, I don't know if you have followed any type of, cinematic events happening as of late, but there's very possible that there is people that say, may the force be with you, in a more renewed vigor. And others may say, live long and prosper. I don't know. Whatever really encourages you or...
I see that.
I realize that in this season there's something new that God's doing. Well, is it new? I think it's the same thing He's been trying to do since the beginning, is to dwell
Yes.
in a living tabernacle that He originally built. I mean, His plan was to walk with Adam in the cool of the day. He wanted to live with him. He wanted to converse and communicate. How many in this day and age live with people and never talk to them?
My mind.
Sometimes my wife and I, we when you have other humans that live in your house, it's very possible that they require much of your attention, even after they're supposed to be sleeping. And just to have communication is important. Just to talk. about what's happening in life. You have to be on the same page. Got to be going in the same direction.
Yeah, be aware.
Well, in just as much as we need to communicate with the people we live with in our own house, not so much anymore because we have two vehicles. Before it was, you had to really clarify who gets the car first, right? Coordinate that meeting with that plan. Yeah. But if we're going to be with God and be His helpmate, then we need to communicate with Him.
Yes.
So if we're going to work with Him, my question is the force with us? Is the power of God manifested in our life? Is our candles lit? Are we considering being dedicated, or did we forget about that? Well, I guarantee you, things are going to come up, things are going to happen. You will have emotions. And that's what makes you unique. And what you do with them this year is going to determine the results you have. 2 Kings chapter 4. There's a couple stories in this book that I just want to read. And then, I read my Bible, and I know that this wasn't written yesterday. But I believe there's things in here that we can hear and we can see that are for today. And maybe the story we read yesterday isn't as exciting as the story we need to read for today, because that was yesterday's story. So I was reading along, and I was reading some things in 1 Kings, and I thought, well, that's a good story. And then I read this one. And I thought, oh, that one is for today. Okay, God, what are you saying in this story today? Now it goes from just, I did my Bible reading, but I begin to hear Him speak to me today in this story. So 2 Kings chapter 4 and verse 1, it begins with this. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets. So this was a wife of someone who was in church, in the ministry. And she cried out to Elisha, saying, your servant, my husband, is dead. So this was someone who helped Elisha, was one of his servants. And you know that your servant feared the Lord. It's an interesting concept. How many people today fear the judgment of God? I guarantee you, no one who's desecrating their temple has any fear of God's judgment. And there's nothing left to let them know that they're not connected to Him. Because they've never felt Him, so they wouldn't know if He wasn't there. But there's some voices, like Minister Riley talked about. Here's the rest of the story. And the creditor is coming to take my sons to be his slaves. Boy, serving God is perfect. Everything works out. I don't have any problems, no tests, no challenges to overcome. God just takes care of everything. If that's what we're selling Christianity is, it's not. Don't lie to anybody, because then when they do get saved, they're going to go, wait a minute, this is not what I paid for. Can't pay for it anyway, so if you're selling it, that might not be how this works. But and the creditor is coming to take my two sons to be his slaves. So Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? What do you want me to do about it? Well, tell me, what do you have in your house? What do you have in your life? You're faced with an impossible situation. What do you have? We can only work with what you have. God is saying, I can only work with what you have lit. Now, I'll help you light them, but if you don't want any of them lit, my help isn't going to do anything. So the widow is saying, hey, I need you to fix this. And he turns and says, what do you have? And she said, your maidservant has nothing. How many feel when you're faced with a situation, because you cannot solve the situation in yourself, I have nothing. I don't have a solution. That's why I'm asking you. But the Spirit of God and what Elisha is saying is, well, what do you have? What do you have I can work with? I can't do it for you, but what do you have? Well, I think we're coming into this season where we have the 5 wise and the 5 foolish, and what do you have? If you don't have anything to work with, you're going to have to go start getting something that God can work with. And it may be too late by the time you realize you don't have anything to work with. I want God to find me and say, I got something to work with. There's something that he recognizes in his life that he has, and now I can work with that. It doesn't mean I have to be perfect. I gotta at least try. I gotta recognize I need help. I gotta recognize, oh, I threw holiness out the door. I need help. God can work when we recognize that we need him. Not need him to do it for me, need him to help me shovel out the junk that I've carried into my life. Well, I have nothing in the house but a jar of oil. But it's not enough. So why are we even talking about it? Do we limit God? Well, this door closed. It's not what I wanted. What I have isn't enough, God. So you're going to have to do it. All I have is a jar of oil. Then he said, go borrow vessels from everywhere. From all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. What? I find this interesting. Do you have a place prepared for God to work in your life? I mean, do you have something for God to work with, and do you have a place prepared for him to do something in your life? How many has ever wanted to use your dining room table for dinner? And for the last 15 days, it has not been used for dinner. It has been used for storage. Loading and unloading and logistics and... And there's no room to sit down and put anything on the table because it's deep. I mean, there's layers. I mean, you've got dust, you've got things, you've got clothes, you've got... Maybe someone had dinner and then things never got taken off. And
that's where we put that child.
It takes effort to clean the table off, especially if you don't do it right away. I challenge my children to, you now need a wet wipe to deal with what the table is, because you let Cocoa Puffs have their way for 15 minutes. I mean, also known as concrete. But so you're going to have to it's going to take more than a dry paper towel to deal with what has been left on the table. You're going to have to work at this preparation. Going and carrying vessels from the neighbor's house, probably everybody are like, what are you doing? But it's important that we have a place for God to move in our life. Don't just get a few. And he said this, and when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you.
Nobody else needs to know.
Do you have a relationship with God that you're willing to just be alone with Him?
Yeah, that's it.
No one else needs to see this. This isn't to impress anyone. I need to have a testimony. I need to have God working in my life. I'm going to light some things up, and I want God's manifested presence in my life. This is something that then now no one can take from me. And it's possible if we leave the door open, we will keep performance mode on. Or it's an open opportunity for someone to come in and distract us, and or try to get in on what you have and capitalize on it. Do you understand? People cannot take your testimony and call it theirs.
That is true. Get your own.
You have to have your own. You have to be in the place with, it's over. I need God and I need help.
Yes, sir.
So they shut the door. You and your sons. Then pour your one vessel of oil, pour it into all those vessels, and set aside the full ones. So when she went from him and shut the door behind her, her and her sons who brought the vessels to her, she poured it out. I mean, picture it. I got my little oil jar. How many has the little jar of oil, with the little stopper on top, pouring it out, to cook a little with. And she's got her 5-gallon barrel over there for someone who was really into pottery that month, making stuff. And she's just pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring. After the first one, that'd be impressive. But then what did she say? She said, then it came to pass when the vessels were full, that they said to her son, bring me another vessel.
Yeah, keep it coming. I want to see it more.
I mean, it's not empty yet. God hasn't ran out yet. The power of God is still working. Bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there's not another vessel. There's no more room to contain any more. And the oil stopped. Do you understand? Your preparation for God to move in your life is going to determine how much He's able to move. If you make no room for Him, there's no space for Him to be manifest. How much we're dedicated, how much we prepare, what type of place we give Him to be and to dwell and to show up is going to determine how much He gets to do. And then she came and told the man of God and he said, well, go sell the oil and pay your debt. And you and your sons live on the rest. One afternoon, God went from, I will protect your sons from going and being slaves, to not only have I taken care of your debt, but now I have provided your retirement for the rest of your life.
And oil.
Boy, Does God do exceedingly and abundantly above all we could ask or think? Well, He does when we are prepared and we're obedient to His instruction.
Yeah, know that He is.
But how many times are we disobedient to His instruction and we don't believe that we have anything He can work with?
Yeah.
And so we never shut the door and begin to just be obedient to what God said.
Amen.
There was another story. It's not very far. 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. And he was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. There's very successful people that still are going to have issues in their life. God is saying every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. God is looking for everyone to have a choice, an opportunity to say yes to God or to say no, so that He may then, they choose. And the Syrians had gone out on raids, and they brought back a captive, a young girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy." And Naaman went and told his master, saying thus, this and that, and he repeated the story. Thus and thus said the girl who is from the land of Israel. Then the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised when this letter comes to you that I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." Wow. I mean, this dude showed up. And he had very full intention of paying for it. He recognized what he was asking for was of some value. And it happened when the king of Israel read the letter that he tore his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive? This man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy. Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me. So then when Elisha, the man of God, heard what the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." It's really important to know what God is doing, or we will see the worst in every situation. If we don't have God's perspective, we will think, oh, here's the enemy coming to destroy me. And what God was really doing, He was wanting to manifest the power of God to someone who would never have the opportunity. God was using this small young person who was in a horrible situation, stood up and told the truth. And now here is the enemy coming and looking for help. So then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him. Elisha must have a larger house than I do. Because when the UPS man comes to the door, he beeps the horn at the road, and I can hear him. Anyway, And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." And Naaman was super excited. He was like, fantastic. This is awesome. Woohoo! Oh. I mean, he got what he wanted. But Naaman, verse 11, but Naaman became furious and went away and said, "Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord and wave his magic wand and his God. And he will call on the name of the Lord and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy." And, I mean, for crying out loud, are not Abana and the Phanar rivers of Damascus better than the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in rage. I mean, that's not how I want you to help me, God. That's not good enough for me. How many times has our deliverance been at hand, but because we did not think that's the way God would do it or want God to do it that way, we walk away from our deliverance. We walk away from our healing, our restoration because, well, I don't really like it doing it that way. That's uncomfortable. I'm not going to the muddy, dirty, stinky river that you want me to go wash in because I don't think that's washing. If I wanted to roll around in a mud puddle, I would have rolled around in a mud puddle. But that's what God said to do. Well, then his servant came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it?" God, I want you to manifest. God, I want to hear your voice. God, How's your relationship with God? God, I'm willing to buy my healing. What's the one thing God doesn't have? There's a great man of God who once spoke this great revelation. I don't know if you've heard of him or read any of his books. But he once said, many people have quoted him over the years, the one thing God doesn't have is your obedience. God didn't need his stuff. But to help him, to be his God, to really change him, God needed him to be obedient and be humbled. So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child. Now, obviously, this guy wasn't a little child. But my hands and my skin is not as smooth as my child's skin. Do you understand? You can try to get your healing, and then you can also have another option, what God's restoration does when you're obedient. See, God went beyond, okay, I've dealt with the problem. He fully restored him. I mean, he got rid of wrinkles. The evidence of what he had gone through. If his skin was like a baby, then, wrinkles are gone. All the wounds that he probably had, experienced of being in battle. What does God do when he gets involved in our life? He was doing more than healing him. How many people come to God just wanting to get their problem fixed? And God is saying, your problem is really here for one purpose: to restore our relationship, to bring you to a place that you will completely be restored. Now, how you got in here, the curse doesn't come causeless. I didn't make that happen, but I'm going to make something far greater than you just fixing your problem. And I'm not preaching that, God makes us sick to teach us a lesson. That is not what I'm saying. This man had no relationship with God. And God was using this opportunity to change not only his physical being, but to change his heart. Just like we learned at the Feast of Dedication. And so he returned to the man of God and all his aids, and he came and stood before him, and he said, "Indeed, now I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel." Do you understand what obedience taught him? All those other gods that I've been serving are not gods anymore. This is the only one true God. What was God really trying to do? He was trying to save the lost. In our day and age, my goal is not to go get someone healed. I look at someone and I think, wow, look at their physical ailment. Is my goal to get them healed, or is my goal to save their life? Now, the healing really only is valuable if their life is saved. Because if they are healed, but yet their life is not saved, if they are not connected to God, their eternity is not changed. So, what does the big concept of, I'm going to run to church, I'm going to get healed, but I don't have to change, I don't need to know God, I'm just going to go get my healing. And then they return to the same place. What benefit has that in eternity? Why would God be even interested in that? That's not, He doesn't heal people just to heal them. He heals them to save them from an eternity of separation from Him. Why does God want us to dedicate our life? Well, so I could live holy. No. So that for eternity I'm not separated from Him. He is doing these things to change my life so that He can actually be God. So now, he's from his own perspective. Naaman's attitude has changed. And would it have changed if he was exalted and honored for what he had accomplished inside of his healing? If I get God to do it the way I want it, am I God or is He? Is God answering to me or am I answering to Him? For me to be in authority, I have to be submitted. And if I'm telling God how to do it, then I'm not submitted. So God just lays it out there. Go do the one thing you don't want to do. Because then I'll know if you really will be obedient. Go make your bed. That's the one thing I don't want to do. I'm just going to get in it in a few hours and mess it all up. I know. But when you're 35, I don't want you calling me to come make your bed. I want you to have the ability to do what is right and then to teach someone else what is right. So God's helping set us up and prepare us. And so Naaman returned and he said, please take a gift from your servant. And Elisha said, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." Now I wonder why. Why did he do that? Well, one, I'm sure God was doing lots of things. Do you ever notice God's doing a whole lot of things? One, God was teaching Elisha not to, sell his gift to make money. And I have seen that for my entire life when I look into this culture of Christianity and I look at them and they at one moment have a pure gift of God, and then they realize now I can take that gift and I can do something with it. And then it turns into now they're just selling that, and then eventually God's gone, because obviously that's not what God's here to do. And now they're having to manifest that and keep that show up. And now they've had to rely on familiar spirits to sell the trick,
Yes, sir.
to perpetuate the big ministry they've built. God's not in any of that. What do we teach around here? We teach the divine order of giving, not come by your healing. Obedience is better than sacrifice.
Yes, sir.
So Elisha said, "I will receive nothing." Well, what's the other aspect of that? Well, if I could buy my healing, then it comes back to, well, I could do it again if I need to. Now it comes back to, well, my great wealth did it. Well, then that puts it out of the reach of someone who doesn't have that. And it was a free gift to start with. God was actually looking to gain his soul in the beginning, and that's what was important. So if they had done a money exchange, well, now they're just, buying and selling the power of God. So please take a gift from your servant. But he said, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, "Then if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth, for your servant will no longer offer either burnt offerings or sacrifice to other gods." What? I mean, now not only has this man been healed, he's recognized the one true living God, but now he's changing his choice on who he's going to worship. Was God's goal to get him healed? Or was God's goal to change his dedication to a false god? I mean, God did a whole lot more than what he asked for.
Yes, sir.
And he didn't charge him for it. He won this man's worship and changed him from being one who was going to worship a pagan god to someone who, I'm not going to worship it anymore. All in one afternoon. When you look at someone who is sick, do you see a sick person? Or do you see someone in one afternoon, they could run into the one true living God, and their candles that they didn't even know existed, that are definitely not lit, could be changed? Or we could cheaply sell God's, magic to entertain or to try to entice someone to come to our church where you get free healing. See, it never causes people to change until they get all the way to the point where I will no longer worship these other gods. You serve the one true living God. I choose to serve the one true God.
Amen.
As well.
Amen.
Now what happens? Now God's able to do more than just, fix their problem. He restores things in their life beyond what they knew they needed. Our focus is the manifestation of God. What are we looking for in this next year? And what do we, if you told someone, please go in the other room and get that shirt. Well, how do you know what that is? Well, you think I mean something. I think he means the blue one. But I could mean the red one. I could mean the button-up one. I could mean the pullover one. I could mean the one. What is the manifestation of God? You could go into this year looking for the wrong shirt. I don't want you to look for the wrong thing and then come back and say, I couldn't find it. It's not there. I looked everywhere. Like, just kind of basically, I stood in the room and I just glanced rapidly for like 1 second and I didn't see it. I mean, I didn't look at the closet or in my drawer or underneath the pile of clothes or in my bed. I mean, you might have to look for it. But if you're looking for the wrong thing, you could be staring right at it and not think that that's it. What we kind of talked about a little bit about Wednesday and in understanding what is the manifestation of God's presence in a service, in our life. Why does amazing things happen in the Bible? Why do I come to church and it's, I don't hear any of them stories? I mean, people walked on water and leprosy being healed and no one was laying hands on them and the band wasn't just playing that power chord. I mean, this guy went just to a dirty river and dunked himself. What will the manifested presence of God look like in this next year? Don't miss it because you're looking for it like you've seen it before. It's possible you will miss and your candles will be blown out because you will have tried to light them with what you thought the manifestation of God was before. And because you now know the truth, if you go back to what you thought was God when you were in a desecrated condition, and you go back and you do what you thought was right in a desecrated position, and you think that will, that produce, I felt goosebumps, or I felt this, or I felt that. Is that really what the presence of God is? Because, again, we're trying to take our five senses, our, touch and eyes and hearing and feeling and, smell and taste, and we're trying to say, okay, there's God inside of that box. What will that look like? It may not look like what we've seen before. And I don't want to miss what God's doing because I'm looking for Him of what I thought that's what He was. So, now, interesting. So Naaman said, then I'm going to give you 2 mule loads of earth, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. Yet in this thing may the Lord pardon your servant when my master... So now he's saying, now, the people I work for, They haven't changed their mind about this. So now he went all the way from himself. I need to get healed. That's not how I want you to do it, God. Now he's beginning to go into, now my master who hasn't had this experience, he's going to go to worship another God, and guess what's going to happen? I know what's going to happen. God can't be in his life because he's worshiping another God. So now he's thinking about someone else, all in one afternoon. When God gets involved in someone's life and he restores them, this process is not complicated. It's not a hard thing. The hardest part was humbling himself and being obedient.
Yes, sir.
As soon as we humble ourselves and tell pride to shut the front door, guess what happens? God's like, fantastic, now we can do something. Now I can be God instead of you, because when you're God, I can't be. So, yet in this thing may the Lord pardon your servant when my master goes into the temple. I had to go back and he's still my boss. And he's going to do what's wrong. Please pardon. I got to be obedient to him. What are you going to, please pardon me. To worship there, and leans on my hand, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon. And when I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord please pardon your servant in this thing. Then he said to him, go in peace. So he departed from him in a short distance. So now he's going, I recognize what I have to go do is wrong. It's wrong against God. Forgive me. Do you understand that if we don't recognize sin as sin, we will never ask for forgiveness?
That's it.
And here's the thing. That's what God is wanting us to do. He's not saying, I want you to be perfect all the time, forever and ever and ever. But as soon as holiness has the opportunity to start to be blown out, we come and say, I recognize that that's wrong. And the sacrifice I will make is I will be separated from God's presence. I'm not going to be able to hear his voice. I'm going to have to call out for help, and I'm going to have to start back over at getting my temple clean. That's valuable to me. I'm going to fight to stay in the right place. I'm going to recognize what is sin and what is wrong, and I'm going to make an effort to stay out of it. And if I get my feet dirty, if I get mud on my shoes, I'm going to do something about it. So then he headed out and he left. And then he said to him, go in peace. And so he departed from him a short distance. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, look, my master has spared Naaman the Syrian. Why not receive from his hands what he brought? But as the Lord lives. Do you understand? Gehazi saw all the things he could do with that to build the ministry. Or to pad his lifestyle. Or, okay. Probably from his perspective, an honorable position. But do you notice Gehazi was not the man of God, or Gehazi? Do you know why you're not the one in charge? Because you may not see all that God is doing in one time. And so, look, my master has spared Naaman, yes. And so Gehazi pursued Naaman. Receive from his hands, verse 20, what he brought, but as the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something from him. So Gehazi pursued. I didn't hear a question in there. Yeah. I've got a great idea. I'm going to go do it. Right. So Gehazi pursued Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, is all well? I was just there. What happened? And he said, all is well. My master has sent me, saying, indeed, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver. So now I'm going to do the Lord's business, and I'm going to break the commandments to do it. So Naaman said, please take 2 talents. And he urged him, and he bound 2 talents of silver into bags and changes of garments and handed them to his servants. And they carried them on ahead of him. And when he came to citadel, he took them from their hand and stored them. He went and hid them. Stored them in the house, and then he let the men go, and they departed. And when he went in and stood before his master Elisha, said to him, where did you go, Gehazi? It's a big house. He's got to send people to the front door for crying out loud. And your servant didn't, and Gehazi, he said, your servant did not go anywhere. Let's just throw a wet rag on holiness, because I am in the ministry and I'm helping God out. I am doing something great for God. And then he said, did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Yeah. Is it time to receive money and to receive clothing, olives, groves, and vineyards, and sheep, and oxen, male and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out of his presence leprous, as white as snow. I do not want to help God out when God does not tell me to help him out. I wonder why God did not want that man's riches. They were an enemy. His servant was a kidnapped child from their own nation. It's very possible his money, do we want to call it, drug money or blood money or however you want to label his money? I don't think they had, cleaners for their money back then. There was no laundromats, right? I don't know. I'm not in that business. I don't know how it all works, okay? So it's very possible God did not want to submit to saying, I need that. Do we need the world to supply and sustain us? There was a curse that came with that. I was recently had been pursuing some work, and there was an opportunity to do some freelance work, and so I filled out the form and called and blah blah blah, and finally the manager of the company called me back and talked with me for a while, and we probably talked for 2 hours, and he was pretty excited about everything, and he told me what the pay structure was, and I wasn't super excited about it, but I thought, well, if I really get into a tight spot, it's something. But it was like, I'd have to work on Saturday night. And I thought, I really want to get out of working on Saturday night, God. I know you want me to do that. But if there's no other option, I can make that work to pay the bills, right? So, we end the conversation, and I sent him some stuff so he could review. And so he calls me back, or he didn't call me back. He emailed me back a few hours later and said, we've reviewed your stuff, but we feel there's some, technical and creative differences that doesn't really match our style. And we wish you the best, but, and so then I was like, he doesn't like my work. But God, I thought you were my provider. So I was a little emotional when my wife got home from work, and I was sad, right? So, you do your best, and then someone say it's not good enough for me. And see how your emotions deals with how much light you have lit and how windy it gets in your house, right? What's your test? So, goes on and on. We talk about stuff. And so anyway, I realized, here's the reality. I was the one who wanted to say, no, I don't want to work for that small amount of money. Because I really didn't want to do that. But boy, it didn't feel good you saying you didn't want me to work for you. But then I look, okay, what is God doing? I'm just going to remove this temptation from your life, son, so that you are not tempted to break my commandments and go work on the Sabbath. Because every time they would call, it would be a guaranteed in the window of the Sabbath. Do you know that's when people get married, is in Sabbath time? And so I'm like, okay, I know. We talked about this earlier and how I wanted to just that not be what I'm focusing on. To look for work and opportunities that I could work not on the Sabbath. Okay, I know. But I got distracted. How many's ever gotten distracted? Sure. I mean, they're going to just fill my calendar up. I could do such great things for you, God. How do you respond when you are presented with an opportunity and that opportunity goes against the commandments of God? So, anyway, I'm obviously not going to work for him. And I had to learn about my pride, and I had to deal with my emotions, and then I had to really look and say, well, why am I even pursuing it? Gehazi thought I could do great things with it. But if I willfully take on that, so Gehazi's descendants was affected by his choice. Wow. Did God tell Elisha? I mean, we don't know what Elisha's conversation with God was. Well, like, did you see the boatload that this guy brought? We don't know Elisha's conversation with God about that. But Elisha apparently heard God and had dealt with his dollar sign emotions. I mean, he pretty much said, I'm not touching any of your money. Well, I wonder why. If God said don't, do you understand, was it, man, that bad Gehazi, he's getting 2 timeouts because he didn't obey. Is that what it was? Or this is what God had said. You can't touch any of that because now he becomes your source, not me. And we don't want the curse that comes with where he got that money. Because that money was gained because they were in a temple worshiping another god. But here's the reality. That wouldn't save them. And they also need to know that what that produces won't save you either.
Yes.
And in fact, here's the results of what that is. Where did Naaman get it to start with?
That's it. Yes, sir.
I mean, just some biology, it's kind of contagious. Have you ever had money and not touched it?
Yes.
Yeah, I put it right in the bank and I never touch it. But I mean, you know, the guy's carrying all the money and he hands it to him. He's contagious. God's doing a simple thing. I'm just going to say, don't touch that. I don't want you to get it. God's looking out for us. Our obedience affects our future. And our obedience is going to affect our children's future. What is holiness really? Boy, I'll be obedient to do just what you said, and then I'll trust you, God, that you'll take care of your ministry. Because if it was my ministry, Gehazi was running his ministry, and he ran that thing into the ground in an afternoon. Doing something great for God. He ruined his life, destroyed his children's lives, and lost his position. Trying to help God out. Don't help God unless God tells you to do something. Well, why is it important to be holy? So you know what he's saying. And you know the difference of when the flesh comes up with an idea and when God comes up with an idea. In this season, there's a whole group of people that are saying, I enjoyed the presence of God in my desecration.
The present, that which has got a bow on.
Wasn't that beautiful? But that wasn't God. That wasn't Yahovah. That was another God. They enjoyed that other God's presence. That's a sobering thought. Okay, how do we take it to the next step, the next level in our life? Okay, we may know the truth. I was taught the truth. Don't celebrate Christmas. It's Halloween. That's what my 3-year-old says. Hey, you got to start somewhere. Doesn't have the full understanding of it. As soon as the in between the shows, we delete the shows that celebrate paganism, and then there's commercials in between them. It's Christmas, shut it off. She doesn't know how to run the remote yet. So she stop it, it's bad, stop it. And it's just an advertisement for a Christmas show that's going to, come on. What have you learned and what are you living and doing about it? Well, you got to start somewhere. I mean, if you let the devil in, he's in. Yeah. If you tell him to get out, you resist the enemy, he must what? Flee. How do you do that? What does the devil look like? I don't know. He's probably 16 by 9 in HD, 1080p. How does the devil get in your life? He might get in through 4G LTE. I don't know. I mean, it rhymes. You're supposed to laugh. Sorry. It was too punny for everyone. Okay. So here's the thing. Do you want the manifested presence of God? Well, obedience to God and his instructions he gave is the first step to that. What I want us to really recognize is, what is God going to look like in this next year, and how will he manifest himself? Don't be tricked into thinking that was God when it's not. Be able to just see the difference. And I want you to be able to recognize if God's presence left. Would you know it? We talked about Samson. Samson, many times, he lied about what his promise was, right? He had a lot of trouble with the ladies. I mean, that's. You just read that book and, he went to meet someone who was perfect and always did everything right. And, that's not how it went. He went looking for trouble and he found it. He went to where he shouldn't be, and guess what he found? Trouble. So much trouble that his enemy knew he had a problem with it. So what did the enemy do? Capitalized on his weakness because he kicked their butt in everything else. I mean, in jawbone fighting and lion face ripping. I mean, he was like, arm wrestling. He kicked their butt. He's the winner. But, trouble with the ladies at night, they had the upper hand. They had the lady. And he thought he was invincible. Well, I got a covenant with God. I can do whatever I want, and there's no consequences, because I'll just stand up and fight my way out. But the enemy wore him down. How many has ever been worn down? I'll keep my secret, but if you really love me, you'll defile yourself and your God if you really love me. You're not looking for my love. You are looking for the payday that's coming. And when you get that payday, it won't be worth it. And so now we've got Samson being worn down. And finally, he lies and makes up stories that, if I'm bound with new ropes and old ropes and fancy cords and whatever. Making up stories. Finally, she got sick of being lied to because they were going to steal her house or whatever. They were threatening her. She had to come through. And so finally she pushed and pursued and used whatever assets she had available to her to get the information. And so he gave in. Do you understand? He would have never been in that position if he had just stayed in his own place.
Yes, sir.
I mean, he obviously wasn't in his house because he tore the gate off the city he was in and chucked it at the hillside, right? God wants to be our deliverer, but if we go looking for the one thing that is our weakness, do you know eventually the wages of sin is death? And God's not mocked. If you don't want me to deliver you, guess what? You won't be delivered. And it eventually will destroy you. So Samson had to make a choice. Is the force with me? Well, he thought it always would be. He's like, I got grace for days. I mean, I go to church. I go and I fight God's battles, but I need a break. I need a break from God. I got to go sin for a little while to recharge my batteries. What story do we tell ourselves to make desecrating the temple okay?
We've been telling stories to other people.
So now Samson thinks, well, God, I did it once, and I didn't lose my power, so it must be okay. Because of grace, we think it's okay to sin and to say, I don't want you, God, in my life, when God is saying, I love you enough, I'm not going to kill you on the first take here. I'm going to give you an opportunity to change. But eventually, that period is going to end. There will be one time, and that's what Samson found. And really what it was is when he broke his covenant with God. He let his secret out, and what did the enemy do? Oh, that's such a precious secret. I'll protect it. I'll keep it safe. I mean, he didn't get the words out of his mouth, and she had his head shaved smoother than a baby's bottom, right? I mean, there was no, let's think about it. She didn't go pray about it. The enemy immediately took what was precious between him and God and exploited it. How many times has people taken what God has given them and they have used it on their own lusts? They've consumed it on themselves. They've taken something that was precious and exchanged it for something in the flesh, money, fame, recognition, power, authority, whatever it is, and now it's gone. The oil is gone. There's no more place for him. God's power was on him at one time, but he stood up, and after he broke covenant with God, he shook himself and he wasn't strong anymore. God was not with him. Many people have probably started the process of being pure before God, and then God moves miraculous things in their life and they help other people. And then the opportunity, like Gehazi experienced. No longer was it about God anymore. Now it was about getting a bigger payday. And I want it even though I shouldn't have it, and even though it will destroy me because it's contaminated, because it's unclean. But this might be the way God's going to provide for me. Work all the Sabbaths. 350 weddings a year. You could be one of our top videographers. Could be. Apparently I'm not. Well, God's not blessing me. Why would God bless me to break his commandments? I mean, I can look at it two ways. Why would I expect him to help me break his commandments? He's probably not in that. He's probably not going to help me do that. And then we can get mad at God and say, well, I'm a tither and I pay my giving. I'm not going to help you in hell. I'm not going to help you get there. I'm not buying you the ticket and helping you get there. My job is to deliver you and save you. You shall keep the Sabbath. Remember it. You forgot it. Let me help you remember it. How is your tabernacle? Is there a place for God to live and God to dwell? Is the force with you? If you were to stand up right now and be in the fight, would God be with you in the fight? Or would you find yourself have given up your covenant with him? Samson shook himself and his strength was gone. One day, God is going to have to say, you're going to have to realize the wages of sin is death. The curse doesn't come causeless. I can't bless you in that state. So if I let you reap the results of your choices, then there's the potential that you'll change. The potential that you will say, whoa. And so Samson went through that process. Well, it took time. He lost his sight. He was held captive and in chains for a period of time until his covenant regrew and people forgot about it. God used him one more time, but do you understand his ability to help God ended that day? He had one more push. Yeah, it was impressive, but what could he have done had he been obedient and not had to pay the price for his disobedience? What do we sacrifice in our life because we don't allow God to be our deliverer, because we let the candles be blown out, and so then we have to go through the process of change? God's not willing that any should perish. I mean, He's not looking for that to happen, but if we're not really saved, we're not really saved. Naaman, God wasn't looking to heal him. God was looking to save him. He just simply used his opportunity and his need to prove that he was God. That's what God wants to do in all of our lives and in all the lives of the people that we meet. What will be a witness? We won't know what God's plan is. I mean, get up tomorrow morning, and if you could hear what God's plan was for all the people who are sick and in need of Him, and you see beyond the flesh, see beyond the circumstance. If I could, keep my candles lit long enough and deem it worth enough that I would stay holy, God would reveal to me His plan. And in that far enough, I might realize, okay, all of a sudden God hands me the power to do something with it. And I use it once. Well, the next time will I use it and consume it on myself? Look what I can do. How many times has God handed that out to a man or a woman in this earth in the last 100 years? And they've taken that precious thing and they've built an empire with it, and they've not built the kingdom of God. I do not want the manifestation of the power of God to pay my bills. That keeps me holy. Because when God says don't touch it, don't touch it.
Yeah, that was the wife of the prophet.
Let's look for God to manifest. I want to get to this place where I'm at peace with Him. I'm at one with Him. I'm not fighting to get clean. I've been living with Him. I've been talking with Him. I've been fellowshipping with Him. And He is telling me, you know that person that you run into at the store and you think everything's okay and you have no idea how their life's better than yours? How could I possibly witness to them? Let me tell you what's really going on. Let me tell you how I want to save their soul. That's God manifesting. Why was this man born blind? So I could save his soul. The what I really wanted to do be demonstrated. Father, we love you today. We thank you that you desire to be with us. And God, we recognize that as something precious. Your presence in our life is precious. So we change what we're looking for. If I've been looking for old-time revival, I'm looking for what God looks like today. How are you going to manifest yourself today in courage and giving and peace and hope and, considering someone above ourself? Thank you, Heavenly Father, that in this season we don't forget that this is a year of this type of dedication, this focus on this, so we don't forget that, and we will be obedient to your instruction. And I thank you that when we're obedient to your instruction, you protect us, and you can then really do what you need to do in our life. So I thank you that when we get to those moments, when we stand up and we say, is God with me? We can be confident in saying, I've kept my covenant with God. I've stayed holy before you. I can trust that God is with me. I'm not alone in this. I thank you that we'll have peace no matter what we face or what obstacle we come up against. Then we'll have courage to be able to declare the truth and speak the truth. Amen. Let's worship the Lord.